Hey everyone, so I'm really happy that the squat video was so popular and seemed to help a lot of people. So I'm going to attempt to do the same thing with another really critical form lift, which is the deadlift. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to try to make this video right to the point. It's probably going to be long as well because there are a lot of nuances and things to cover in the deadlift. But let's get right to it. What should you always be doing? Like I talked about in the squat video, you always need to record your form. It's really important to do it from the side because that's really going to be the most telling angle definitely for squats and for deadlifts. You can get front videos obviously to make sure you're not uneven and unbalanced, but the side's really going to tell you the most as far as torso angle and safety of the lift and efficiency of the lift. Because again, you want to see that you're moving the bar in a straight path. What should I have before I even start? One of the things is you definitely want to have high socks because one of the really critical things with the deadlift is keeping the bar close to your body. It is going to rub against your shins. It should be rubbing against your shins. If it's not, that immediately is a problem. That tells you that you are not efficient in the lift right now. So high socks, you can get shin guards, you can take the plastic off of a shin guard, which I've done before, so you just have the styrofoam and put it under your sock if you're really worried about getting bloody shins. Another thing that's important is your footwear. There's a lot of debate over, what should I wear. One thing that's really important is to try to have something that doesn't really have much of a heel or a sole. Obviously, the bigger the heel, the more distance the bar has to travel. So the more work needs to be done, it's going to be more difficult to complete the lift. So what you'll see usually is people have deadlift slippers, they'll wear just high socks in the gym. You can't do that in a powerlifting meet. I have wrestling shoes. The reason I like wrestling shoes is because, number one, if you pull with a wider stance, you're going to have a lot more lateral force, and you can get ankle inversion if you don't have lateral support in your shoes. So wrestling shoes, since they're higher up on the ankle, they have better grip, they have more lateral support, so my ankles aren't going to fall in on me, because I've had that happen before with slippers. So that's why I like wrestling shoes. These are Asics Aggressor 2. These are actually one of the grippiest wrestling shoes you can get. So that's what I wear for my pulls. If you pull conventional, you're not going to have that lateral force, so slippers are fine. Some people, there's like Zem shoes, there's those Vibram 5-finger shoes, stuff like that is okay. What you really don't want, again, is something that raises your heel height and something that has cushioning. Again, cushioning absorbs force. You don't want that. You want all of your force going through the floor to transmit to the bar. It's just like squatting in padded, like running shoes. That's not a good thing. That's a problem. You're losing some of the force you're pressing through the ground. The other thing is people talk about chucks. Chucks are good. You can probably use chucks for sumo and conventional. They'll have some lateral support too because they're higher up. They're ankle supporting. Again, for me, the big thing is grip. Wrestling shoes tend to have the best grip just because they're made for wrestlers who need to have grip on the mat. So, how should you be addressing the bar? That's a really good question. That's a really confusing thing for a lot of people because they'll usually see a great deadlifter, and because he pulls sumo, they'll think they need to pull sumo. Or because he pulls conventional, they think they need to pull conventional. One thing that separates that is where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Typically, a guy with longer arms, longer limbs, and a shorter torso is going to be a better conventional puller. Someone who has a better squat usually is going to be a better sumo puller. Reason is because taking the bar off the floor, breaking the floor with the bar in sumo is a lot of quad. Someone who's back dominant is going to be stronger in conventional. But that doesn't always hold true in all scenarios. For example, I started conventional. I feel a little more powerful conventional, but the problem is that it's a lot more risky for me because the other difference is how it affects your torso angle. The wider your stance, the more upright you can keep your torso. The closer your stance, the more flexion you're going to have in your torso. So again, when you're talking about like shear forces on your discs, again, a lot more risk involved in a conventional pull. So let's talk about how to address the bar in both stances. There's a lot of similarity between all of the lifts. One of them, like I talked about, in the squat setup is right angles. Right angles are really important because right angles are pretty much where your mechanical advantage is in all of the lifts as far as like joint angles go. So what you want to find is where can I keep my tib and fib, my shin, perpendicular to the ground. So you want a right angle with your shin to the ground. So for some people that's nearly impossible to do in a conventional because what they're going to get is their shin out too far in front of them. So what's the problem with that? Well, one of the problems is that it makes it nearly impossible for you to keep a straight bar path. So if you think about it, you're trying to use your shins as a guide for the bar. So if you keep them perpendicular to the floor and they're straight up and down, it's going to keep the bar going in a straight up and down path, and you can guide it right along. That's the most efficient path. As soon as the bar gets away from you, that's a problem. The weight on the bar is always going to be the same, but the force acting upon you, or that you're creating, is going to be different. One really important thing there is that what really matters is where you start, because that's going to dictate how you finish the lift. So if you start with too much torso flexion, there's going to be a lot more risk involved in safety, but also a lot more difficulty in finishing the lift. If you keep your torso angle locked the whole time, it's really not about whether you have flexion or not. Obviously, you want to try to keep a flat back in the lift, but the biggest thing is that your intravertebral discs are not made to produce force; they're made to absorb force. So if you're, yanking and changing your back angle like this, that's a lot more risky than someone who starts with a little bit of torso flexion and keeps it locked the whole time. So I'm going to briefly talk about grip before I go into sumo deadlifting. I grip with the hook grip, which means you can Google it. It's probably a better explanation you'll get, and you'll be able to visually see it. But what you're doing is this double overhand. You're jamming your hand into the bar, and you're wrapping your thumbs and locking through your thumbs. Why do I do that? Really, mine is simply because I don't like to have kind of a little bit of a uneven balance in my spine. Obviously, if you have one hand under, one hand over, what's it going to do? It's going to make you kind of shift to one side a little bit more than the other. And I just don't like the idea of that. I also feel a little more comfortable. I feel like I'm kind of straightforward as opposed to kind of shifting. Again, if you have history of back problems, you don't want to shift to one side because that's going to make a disc obviously push out more than the other, like pelvic tilt and stuff like that. So I use hook grip. That's why my hands are wrapped like this. They don't have to be. It's just a trick I stole from Olympic lifters, because you will get calluses all over in weird spots. What's the downside to it? Initially, when you start doing it, it hurts. It's going to hurt your thumbs, but you'll get used to it really quick, just like anything else. Are you usually stronger over-under? Initially, yeah, but once you adapt to hook grip, there's no problem. As long as you're jammed in and you're locked in. Some people with different hand sizes find it a lot harder to hook grip if they have a small hand because they can't really lock their thumbs in with their index fingers or the rest of their fingers. So that's how I grip the bar. The alternative is, like I said, over-under. And actually, another thing to discuss really quick before I switch over to sumo deadlifting is the use of straps. If you don't compete in powerlifting, I think straps are a little more acceptable compared to if you do. Obviously, they artificially allow you to hold more weight. It's going to be a bigger problem in a meet if you're not used to holding the weight. You need to keep your grip strength up too. It doesn't matter if you can physically produce enough force to through your body to deadlift 700 pounds, but your grip strength can only hold 600. It doesn't matter. You're not going to pull anything more than 600 because you're going to keep losing the bar. So I definitely recommend against straps if you compete, unless you have to use them. For like example, I have half of a hand right now because it tore my callus off, so I'll probably have to use straps today. But I generally won't use them unless I absolutely have to. One of the things I want to use as a kind of a model for comparison is a deadlift jack. A lot of people use deadlift jacks. Why? Because they're easier to pick the bar up off the ground. One thing that highlights the importance of having tension in your torso, which is a breathing technique, which I'll briefly go over too, is if you imagine this part of the jack, these are your hands, this is your torso. Now imagine if this stuff stayed metal and this was plastic or this was rubber or something. So what's going to happen is I'm going to try to put the force to the bar, and if this is plastic, it's going to snap here, or if it's rubber, it's just going to bend. So what happens if you don't have tension in your back, in your torso? You're going to get a lot of flexion, and you're going to end up really hunched over. So again, I feel like this is a pretty efficient model because most people use these and they know how much easier it makes it. But if you don't have stability here, if you don't have tension, you don't have anything. It's very inefficient. It also highlights what I said about deadlift being a wedge lift. When I talk about wedging, you're wedging yourself into position underneath the bar, getting as close as you can, as close to yourself as you can, and you're creating tension through wedging there. So I talked about finding the position where your shin is perpendicular to the ground. Again, that's going to be common for both alternatives of the lift. So we'll go over conventional first. And there's kind of a difference in, there might be different coaching cues that people have taught you or that you might hear from somebody else. And it's not that I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong. It's just what really matters is what gets you into the right starting position and what keeps you there. So the things I show you necessarily to start might be different for everybody. But the things I show you during the lift and completing the lift, they need to be similar. Before I even get into this, a couple people that I want to talk about where you can see really good form in motion for conventional is going to be Brad Gillingham. It just so happens that he's also like a world record deadlifter. And Mike Teixeira. Amazing, very, very efficient deadlifts. So those are two guys to check out. When I talk about sumo, I'll talk about guys who pull very efficient in sumo. So how do you start the lift? Well, for conventional, you really want to find a position with your feet around shoulder width apart, or really where you feel most powerful. When I say power, I mean like if I was to ask you to do a vertical jump, what position do you think you're going to get the most explosiveness and get the most height in your jump? So the next thing is where to place your feet. There's kind of different cues for depending on who you're listening to on it. Some people say cut your toe in half. I like to actually get the bar up to your shin as close as you can. So basically touching your shin. So get your feet under the bar as much as you can. Why do I say that? Because a problem with deadlifting is that the resistance is in front of you. A lot of people tend to keep better form when they have a trap bar. Well, why is that? Because the resistance is lateral to them. It's right along with their center of mass. So you don't have to try to pull the bar into you. So it's a lot harder for the resistance to get away from you. Whereas now it's in front of you, so you're trying to fight to keep it close to you rather than it being there to begin with. So keep the bar as close to your shin as possible, and when you bend down to grab the bar, you want to bend at your torso, not at the knee. A lot of people think that a deadlift is you're squatting the bar up, and that's actually not true. Deadlift is a wedge lift. So what you're trying to do is kind of wedge yourself into position, which might be more apparent when I actually start the lift and go through a rep to show you. But something else too that I wanted to go over is it's important what happens from this point. A very common error people make is when they start the deadlift, they'll over squat down to the bar, and see what's happening to the bar here? It's already starting them in mechanical disadvantage because it's throwing the resistance in front of them. So now, when you start, it's going to be all back because you have to pull and try to bring it back into you. Very dangerous. It's going to be very hard to finish a lift because you're going to be stuck like this at lockout, and you can't actually fire your glutes to lock it and finish the lift. So that's a very common problem I see. Another very common problem is people dipping their hips too much. So, like I said, people thinking they need to squat the bar off the ground when that's actually not the case. So you can actually, I have too much weight on here right now, where I'll probably herniate a disc if I try to show you. But what happens is, I'll use my technique bar here. So when they try to address the bar and they dip too low, so again, what happens is their shin, they lose that optimal position of their shin. It pushes the bar out in front of them, and it already throws their hips up. So their hips and knees are almost locked. So what has to move to take the bar up? Their back. So what happens when you get up to this position and your knees are already locked? Now you're hunched over and you're stuck. A lot of people get stuck here, and they wonder, why did that happen? Why can't I finish my deadlift at lockout? They think they need to do like rack pulls and stuff like that to help it. That's not the problem. The problem is they're inefficient in the lift, and they need to correct that. So you can't over dip. If you over dip, you're going to come up and it's going to throw you out of position. It's already now putting you into a bad position. So basically what I'll show you here is you need to start at the optimal position and not dip below that. Okay, so I'm finally going to talk about sumo position in deadlifting. What dictates here how wide, how narrow your stance should be in sumo? Again, how you want to do that is where you can find the right position to where you can keep the right shin angle. You want to keep, torso. You want to keep perpendicular to the floor. You want a right angle. So for me, it just ends up that my shins are right on the rings of the bar. So again, setup-wise, it's the same thing. I'm going to bend at my torso, and I'm going to keep the bar as close to myself as I can. So now, in this position, like I said, grip with sumo is inside your thighs. Grip with conventional is outside. So I'm going to go directly inside. I'm going to lock in my hook grip. And now, this, I didn't talk about breathing in the other version. So hopefully people are listening to the sumo version as well. You want to do the Valsalva, the same thing I said with bracing you want to do here. So you want to get your air, you want to lock it in, and again, think about, like I said, with pushing your tongue to the roof of your mouth when you lock in your breath. Again, what you don't want to change here is your torso angle. You want your torso angle to stay the same from where it started to through the lift. Obviously, when you finish, you're going to be upright, I hope. And the bigger thing that's going to be much more apparent is when you're locking out a sumo deadlift, you're really going to see the hip extension. You have to think, one of the cues with sumo is not just driving your legs into the ground, but flexing your glutes, because it's going to help you finish the lift. So I'm going to bend at my torso. I have my shins as close to the bar as possible. My toes are pointed out a little bit, because if your toes are pointed in, it's going to make your shins go out further. So it helps you actually keep the right shin position when you point your toes out a little bit. I'm going to find my grip. I'm going to lock it. Now, I'm going to get my air. I'm going to lock it in, and I'm just going to shift my weight back and put the tension on the bar initially with my my thoracic, along my thoracic spine. What does that do for me? Why is it a better cue for me? Typically because I get the most flexion there, the most rounding. I can keep my back flat in my lumbar, but I tend to get more rounding in my thoracic. So that kind of helps me get in the right position and lock it in right from the start. So I'm going to do a deadlift quick, sumo, so you can see. And then we'll talk about other people who do it much better than me to watch. So what should you see when you're watching this from the side? You really want to see the bar move in a straight path. There's an app called Platform Helper, which is great. You can actually track your bar path. There's, like the bench press, the bar might deviate a little bit from a perfectly straight path. Deadlift, it has to be a straight path. And I mean perfectly straight. If not, there's a problem. There's also a desktop app program you can get called Canovia, where you can track bar path. So a couple people to watch deadlift sumo who have excellent sumo deadlifts are Ian Bell, another world record deadlifter, just so happens to be. Dan Green has an awesome sumo deadlift. A couple things to summarize up the whole thing. One thing I haven't mentioned yet that I want to say is a proper deadlift should look like you're almost trampolining. It should look like you're pushing the bar away from the floor, not you're pulling it with not pulling it off the floor. And all of the guys I've mentioned, they're great examples of that. You can clearly see it almost looks like they're trampolining the bar off the floor, as opposed to just ripping it with kind of brute strength with their back. To kind of go through everything again, setup-wise, that's common between both versions of the lift. Get as close to the bar as you can. Bend at the torso to grab the bar, not at the knee. Depending on the lift, sumo, grip inside, so your forearms are rubbing your thighs. Conventional, grip outside. So again, the inside of your forearms are rubbing the outside of your thighs. Make sure you get your weight back and only dip as far back as you have to, or dip your hips as far back as you, or as far down as you have to start putting tension on the bar. Make sure you have tension on the bar before you initiate. When you initiate the pull, it should be drive through your heels. It should not be rip with your back. As you're getting the bar off the ground, you want to fire your glutes as hard as you can. Always record from the side if you can, to see how you're progressing, where you're breaking down in the movement. Coach's Eye is another great app to use because you can play it in slow motion. Make sure you're always moving the bar in a straight path, and realize that it's going to take time. Ask people for coaching help, people who you know are lifting efficient or have experience with helping athletes with the lifts, so they have a good eye for it. But the biggest thing is to understand that if you were pulling wrong for a really long time, it's going to take time to adjust that. You're going to want to go back to bad habits. Your lift might go down for a little while. You need to be able to accept that. It's basically delaying gratification. Do you want to have a longer career in powerlifting, or do you just want to break a record? Because you might break a record, but you also might break down. So again, you have to see things in the big picture. So that's it. Hope this one helped as much or more than the squat video. I will be doing a bench video, and thank you guys for tuning in and for sticking with me through the long video.